Welcome to another episode of Code for Thought. In this final episode before the summer break, I want to shine some light on the researchers who take their academic work into the private sector. Going from research to startup can be a daunting task, and I wanted to find out how teams go about it and what kind of help is available. In the first part of this episode, we'll hear from the team around Raftery and their journey in creating a business model out of the work on temporal graph analysis. In the second part, I'll be talking to Riam Kanso from ConceptionX, an organization that helps PhD students explore turning their ideas into viable businesses, and all while they're doing their PhD. But first, let's hear from Alhamza, Ben, and Haaroon about their journey into the world of startups.
So my name is Alhamza, and I'm currently working in the industry. I am manager for two different teams, and we are addressing solutions within the anti-fraud and AML section. And my journey there started in pursuing a computer science degree with Queen Mary University of London.
I am Ben Steer. I'm a researcher at Queen Mary University of London and the Alan Turing Institute. I met Hamza and Haaroon when I done my undergraduate at QM as well. I'm a founding member of Choreograph, and I also wear a hat for the LDBC looking at benchmarking graph systems.
Hi, my name is Haaroon Yusuf. I'm a fourth-year PhD student at UCL, and my research largely revolves around tracking crime in cryptocurrencies. Just like Hamza and Ben, I also started my journey with them at Queen Mary many years ago.
So the subject for this podcast episode is from research to startup, and I think you have quite an exciting journey that you're going through that we want to talk a little bit more in detail. So because you've all been working in academia but decided to take your work into the private sector and start up a company, can you explain what the company is you're trying to set up and what it does?
The premise of what we've been working on is looking at around some of the research that myself and some of my colleagues have been doing over the last couple of years, which is looking at temporal graph analytics. So the premise with that is that we want to be able to analyze a network over time, so a set of entities and their relationships in the data, with the premise being that you can say, okay, well, this is what it looks like now, this is what it looked like yesterday, and compare this with different short and long-term patterns, looking for different temporal patterns. So, someone receives money in and then sends it out 2 hours later. Is this a good or bad, and so on, this sort of stuff. I'd been working on that. Haaroon and Hamza had been working in the fraud space, both in cryptocurrency and in finance. So we thought it would be a cool idea for us to kind of merge together with my tool and their knowledge to bring this forward as a kind of tool that people could utilize. We then met some other friends who had been working on a consultancy company, and we kind of decided to all join forces together.
You mentioned finance quite a few times. So is that the main target customer base?
The main focus there is on cryptocurrencies. There's an awful lot of use of cryptocurrencies at the moment. The ability to sort of track what people are doing in this space. I mean, we're all very much in favor of decentralized currencies, but we're also aware that a lot of the issues with it come from people using it for nefarious means. It's quite important for us to be able to, if you ever want to legitimize it and for lots more people to utilize it, there needs to be tools which are able to work out what's going on.
So cryptocurrencies is a good use case that we wanted to start off with because mainly we have a lot of background knowledge in the field. I've done some research in it. It's also because the data is open source and it's free. We're able to download very large quantities of data and graphs of significant size. I mean, the tool isn't just only used for cryptocurrencies, it's very agonistic.
Let's step back a little bit and look at what actually made you go from academia into commerce in the first place, because it's quite a big step, actually.
I would say I think we're trying our best to keep a foot somewhat in both camps. Maybe we're just being a bit naive in that, but I think what it was, at least for me, I imagine the guys may have a separate story, is that I find that, especially in the UK, an awful lot of PhD projects, they only start to become kind of useful and interesting, say, halfway through your third year. So just as you're sort of wrapping up your thesis and everything comes to a close is when you've kind of made your breakthrough, there's something tangible that you have. And then at that point, you sort of put it on a shelf, you go work for Facebook and Google. And I didn't really want that sort of thing to happen with what I was working on. At that point, we'd got some interest from the Turing. There was a couple of companies that were interested in using Raftery, the tool that we've been building. And I'd had a conversation with Haaroon where he'd said, I'm working on this crypto use case. I want to go back through time, and it's really annoying. There's nothing that can do it. And I was like, well, that's what I'm working on. So we actually, we sort of met up and started going through it, and it seemed like it actually worked fairly well for what Haaroon was trying to do. We'd spoken to Hamza about this, so the three of us were like, actually this seems quite a good direction to go in. Why don't we have a think about how could we sort of work together on it? And then, as I said, so we met James, Matt, and Shadi, who had messaged me and said, hey, we're forming a consultancy, because so they'd worked previously in large banks and government and so on. And I said, I'd love to get involved, but Hamza and Haaroon forming a project with me as well. Why don't we all meet up and see how that goes? And then at that point, we all got together and said, okay, well, if we don't know what's going to be working, whether it's the tool or whether it's the consultancy, why don't we just join forces and see which one works? Then straight after that, Haaroon took us into ConceptionX, which really just took us up from there. So I don't know, Haaroon, if you want to pick up on the ConceptionX stuff.
When I wanted to take the idea forward and perhaps try to do some commercialization or make it an open source tool, the first step was I was very unsure on how we can move forward. A couple of people had previously approached me in the past trying to see how I would wanted to commercialize any of my work that I've done in the past, but I didn't have any foothold in the space. I wasn't very experienced. Luckily, at the same time as we were just talking to each other, we had email from UCL saying, we have this ConceptionX program, it's open to all students. If you come in, it's free, we don't take equity, we'll teach you everything about business, give you a foothold into the ecosystem, train you to do your own presentations. We did think it was quite, how would you call it? Too good to be true.
Yeah.
Because there's all this stuff for free and all this training for free, which you could do during a PhD, which wouldn't take too much more time, like at most 1 day a week extra. And so we gave it a go, and we were very lucky that they gave us a lot of support. They trained us well, made us a lot more business oriented. And that also adds on to that. When you do a lot of research projects, unfortunately, not many research projects continue for the long term. Once the research is over, academia really wants to quickly move forward to the next project and continue to publish new and exciting papers, and then let the rest of the world deal with a lot of their findings. So that's one thing we didn't want. We didn't want our projects that we developed to just fade away.
Hamza, I think you're already working in the private sector. So what made you join this project?
So my current role has been an absolute blessing, and I have a lot of what I've learned in the industry as well to the people that have surrounded me in the industry. I've always been a sort of a true researcher at heart, if you may, and I've always enjoyed the element of working on something that's a bit exciting and novel. Creating something for your own is very different. There's a lot of hardship and time and effort that's spent into it, and you really need to believe in it as well. I think the difficulty was, how do you go about to start something that is effectively just an idea? And massive advertisement to ConceptionX, who has been absolutely pivotal in our journey. And I would like to see perhaps more sort of incubator programs in the UK, having that sort of route to market from starting with research and an idea, and actually even being able to join forces back with Ben and Haaroon, who are very close friends of mine, was an instant sale for me.
So how do you deal with that transition from being an engineer, then suddenly having to pitch your sales idea or your business idea to a bunch of salespeople and to commercialize your product, or to actually think about it in product terms? I mean, how did that go about it, and how are you dealing with that?
I think we've probably all got very different experiences of that. I'd say I totally agree. My experience has always been that the things that I find interesting are definitely not the things that, or about Raftery, are definitely not what business people find interesting. I think one of the nice things about it is because where we've gone down the open source route, our experience of kind of engaging with people, at least from a product perspective, has always been kind of, well, here's this cool tool. Like if you have some data, let's hop on a call and discuss how you could model it as a graph, interesting queries you could run, what we think that you might be able to get out of it. My experience has been somewhat that people are generally interested in things like free research labor. So if you just kind of turn up, put your cards on the table, here's this cool thing we have, are you interested? Most people have been fairly receptive to it, actually. But it definitely took a couple of months of, instead of me digging right into why this distributed system is really neat and all these cool, like effectively the research pitch, and them all falling asleep, that slowly has been phased out.
We've been very lucky because we kind of cheated in this sense. ConceptionX helped us. They gave us a lot of skills, training that we needed that we didn't have before, especially for me and Ben. But we also have very good friends. So Hamza, Shadi, James, and Matt are our other co-founders, and they've had many years of experience in industry. Unfortunately, we've been able to lean on them and make sure our pitch decks are correct. Understanding, because we're very lucky that Hamza has got both a research background and an industry background. So if we tell him any complicated research stuff, he can understand it. But he'd also be like, right, but a common person won't understand it, so we can pitch it to one of our other co-founders. We'll say, okay, we don't understand what you're talking about, Hamza, Haaroon, Ben, please can you make it more simpler or make it more formalized?
Transitioning from the academic world, and myself and Ben, we went from Queen Mary and doing our masters to straight into Hewlett Packard and labs out in Bristol, which was again a very sort of researchy setting and environment. Then going into the industry, it's a different world. No one really prepares you for it.
So what's so different?
First and foremost, you almost sort of dropped into the jungle and you need to find your way around if you're not lucky to have the people and support that surround you. That might be the case with corporates or might be a bit different with startups. But then once you're there and then you're sort of landing on your feet, not everything might be as blue patterned or templated as you wish, right? There are challenges which needs to be a bit more research, and it might be a bit more close in terms of PhD, but it's not very similar to what you would perhaps have in your bachelor's. In your bachelor's and your master's degrees, you're not really prepared for the different various elements of the industry and how we might have to go about to solve things. Even then, starting a company, there's a lot of elements of business, sales, financials, and as an engineer, you're perhaps only concerned with things like the technical. Trying to learn about these things is maybe a bit difficult and maybe not be as straightforward as it could be. So in true millennial fashion, even myself had any experience from sales. What I do, I just resolve to various media channels and TV shows. Mad Men, for instance, was one of them that I took a lot of inspiration from.
Okay.
It's different, but having the incubator program and having online tools and resources available to you that you can stand and put your feet on certainly helped. I think that's probably something that I would recommend everyone. Don't be shy from going out there and try and find what could be helpful to you, and just reach out.
Ben, Haaroon and Alhamza, you mentioned, well, you're going to set people asleep, when you start talking about the engineering bit. How do you stop them from falling asleep? So what do you do? What kind of skills do you need?
I mean, I guess it varies from product to product. In our case, our pitch basically turned into, you have old data, it goes back years and you've never done anything with it. If you give it to us, we'll extract all of the entities out, we'll map out the relations between those, and then we'll show you how those have evolved. And then you can use that to better predict where you're going into the future. And that's like, you just sort of come up with this napkin pitch. And a lot of people go, oh, we've been recording logs of this for decades, and it just sits in S3 on Amazon. Getting people on call, it doesn't seem to be particularly hard. Even if you cold call people saying, look, I've got this cool product, it might be useful to you, do you want to hop on for half an hour? Most people are pretty receptive to it. They come on board. We sort of give our napkin pitch to them, and see if they do like it, then we can dig into the details more. So we start talking about the temporal analysis, how it works, how we deploy it, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think something that's very important here as well is identifying really what your unique selling points are, right?
How do you know what your unique selling points are when you don't know what the other people are doing?
Yeah, a lot of market research. Go out there, try and understand who your potential competitors are, understand what is currently being offered in the business, and then try and narrow down towards that sort of unique selling point. I mean, when we sort of myself and Ben started thinking about this tool 4 or 5 years ago now, we basically went down into the industry and started thinking, okay, there is this problem which we have come across time and time again. When trying to sort of understand the data or process the data to answer various questions, yet the existing solutions in the industry don't quite have the right way of addressing them. And this was 5 years ago, and I don't know if the scene has changed much, and I don't know if there's been many tools that's been introduced into the market since, but it continues to be a lingering issue which has found its way to not just the academic world, but also the industry world. The industry and the organizations are starting to think about how they can process and analyze their data in different ways to extract and provide business intelligence. So really, once you have that unique selling point, and I'm quite sure that if you have something that is unique to where you're building, there will be someone who will be interested in it. So it's just about finding those leads and narrowing down who you should pursue. And how you go about that is, of course, then another question, which is try and leverage your industry contacts if you have any, to reach out to your friends, reach out to your academic supervisors, and then the support that you have around you. It's a big world, but it's also a rather small world. And you'll realize that the saying of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon is very much true.
One of the things that Ben and Hamza have also on a build up upon is the story, right? I mean, I know it's very cliche, but having a story which represents what your product can do makes other people imagine what they have and makes them visualize how they can use it. If you look at one of the example early roughly pitches that Ben does, when you pitch academia, it's very different. But someone else in business wouldn't really be attached to that as much. But if you were to pitch them a story, on over a long period of time, we've developed our pitches and made it more formulaic to like a story. We've realized people are very much more receptive. You can even tell, like, once we've seen other people's pitches, those which tell a story keep you ingrained for the whole process.
So getting people hooked seems to be okay. How do you make them come back and say, oh yeah, we're interested to work with you? So how does that work?
That's the key thing, really, isn't it? Exactly as you say. How do you get these people coming back for more? From the tooling perspective, at the moment, we're kind of at the stage where with a good couple of people, they've tried it out. They like what they're seeing. They're getting like insights that they've never been able to see before, and they're now kind of at the what next point. So a lot of that is via consulting and setting these bits up. So basically, we say to them, look, we developed this. We know how it all works. Let us integrate it more and more into your tech stack. That they want things done. It's easier for them to come back to us and to ask. The other aspect, obviously, is that a lot of them have started asking for features that are important for them.
I think, in my opinion, there's so many ways that you could potentially answer that question, and perhaps one of it is, how do you make sure that the leads that you've been given lead somewhere? And there are multiple strategies that you can approach here, right? Either you can be sort of a bit salesy and perhaps insufferable, that you continue to ping and nudge on someone until they follow through. But I think where it sort of boils down to in the end of the day is having confidence in that if you've gotten that far and you've been put in touch with people who seem interested in your product, then probably you have something that is worthwhile, and don't lose confidence in that. And then pursue that confidence and trialing things out with people. Also try and go out to other people and don't put all of your eggs in one basket, perhaps. So something that they would refer to as market validation. Try and understand that there is a market and what the type of people and clients look like. Pursue those people. Make them part of the bigger picture. If you're building something that is exciting, try and make it a bit like a community. Try and involve people in it. Try and make them part of what you're building. And as Ben very much mentioned, this is something that has been working fantastically for us.
There has been some cases where we've shown the product to people and they've said, oh, we don't think it's mature enough for us. Can you come back to us later? And the key thing is you don't forget those connections, right? So we created a list of all the connections that we've met. We wrote down who's managing who. We said, okay, this is the last time we messaged them. This is exactly what they said.
Which brings us to ConceptionX and how they helped you. How did they help you in that transition?
I guess there's 4 areas that I'd kind of view them as. So one is that they provide sort of, I'd say, business seminars and lectures and so on that all of the companies attend. But they were very, very useful. I think I'd say for me and Haaroon, I would say that the rest of the team already had a good amount of knowledge on those sort of things, having been out in industry. But I think it was definitely important for a lot of the teams that were just PhDs to go through. They give you a business coach who sort of helps you along with both decisions and kind of like, making sure you're working as a team and heading in the right direction. They give you a tech coach, which basically is turning all of the ideas that you have buzzing around in your head and filtering them down into the ones that probably make sense for your product. And then the final bit is that they have sort of open presentation days where they bring in loads of VCs and tech enthusiasts and people that basically the sort of people that you definitely want on your mailing list, and allow you to pitch to them. Our business and tech coach have been fantastic, so not disparaging them, but I think the pitches have been really fantastic for us. The amount of people that have contacted us afterwards, I don't think we've ever been proactive with our network going out and trying to find people, because it's just been so reactive off of the ConceptionX. Because then those people sort of refer us to other people. We do get an awful lot of like, oh, I spoke to X and he said you guys were doing something cool. Do you want to hop on for 20 minutes or something? Yeah, so it's been great for that. And that's definitely what I'd recommend ConceptionX for, or any of these accelerators, which I imagine you'd have a similar experience.
Personally, for me, our mentors, Nick and Niall, definitely helped us a lot. We had questions, we didn't know how to resolve them. We wanted extra feedback on if we should go in this direction or that direction. And just having someone there who's had many years of experience definitely gives it a new light. The business coaching definitely helped, especially with me. I didn't have much business background, but from this now I have a much stronger one. And also the grapevine that they provide, right? I think that's almost essential. Like ConceptionX, they force you. You have to go to the presentations. You have to present. They encourage you. Don't worry if you fail. We'll help you refine the presentation. We'll give you one-to-one feedback, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and you keep doing it. It just made us a much more stronger team overall.
Another thing as well that ConceptionX did wonders for us is the amount of network and the number of connections of people that they put us in touch with. And that allowed you to not just validate the idea and understand whether there was a use case for it, but it sets you up for these future connections and engagements that you could take the product onto. And I think that was one of the sort of things that I didn't necessarily expect. No one is really out there to try and get you, right? Like it's a bit of a weird way of thinking about it, but no one is there to try and set you up for failure either. Everyone wants to see you succeed and everyone's trying to be helpful.
And this is a very fuzzy question, I'm afraid. There don't seem to be that many researchers going into the private sector in terms of startup and forming their own business. I mean, there are obviously a lot of people that leave uni and then go into the big corporate wide world. But setting up your own business in the way that, say, happens in other countries, and of course, we're all thinking about Silicon Valley or the East Coast, around MIT, but there seem to be a lot of activities and companies springing up from there. Do you feel that this is the same happening here in the UK? Do we get that kind of engagement? Do we get that kind of activity?
I think it's slowly changing, as in it's getting a lot better. The US, and especially in certain areas, is so much ahead of us. Like if you look at some of the labs at the better universities, their pipeline is literally set up such that if you come up with something good, that gets turned into a startup. Everyone in the lab gets a piece of the action, gets involved. That's what they've just got. They're spinning out amazing papers and amazing companies on the side. My experience, at least the Queen area, I can't speak for other universities, is that this is almost totally foreign. It's not something that anyone really discusses. When I've gone down the line of getting involved with the university and with QM Innovate in our case, and they have a very rigid pipeline of what a spin outs from a university looks like, and this did not involve tech at all. So I think there needs to be a big sort of revolution in that regard in the UK. I'm surprised that more universities haven't been thinking in this line. It drums up interest for the uni. It's great for the PhDs. It makes the research more widely known. I think, unfortunately, a lot of academics are still focused on I need novel papers. I need 3 tier 1 novel papers a year. That's my benchmark. We're quite behind, but there clearly is a momentum to improve that.
So I did one of my master's degrees in University of Cambridge, and when I was there, I was surprised. When you walk into the computer lab, there's a plaque, and there's a massive plaque, and it lists all the companies that have been taken out or has evolved from the university and become very successful companies. The university is very proud of the people that create products and push them forward. If the UK wants their students to be more innovative and push their stuff, then the thing for sure is they need to make sure that IP is always going to be owned by the students. Once you're developing something and you own the rights to it, then you're going to keep going forward. You're going to keep pushing forward, keep innovating, keep developing, because it's your own and it's your own product. But if the university is like, we're going to have 10%, 5%, X%, whatever, then personally, for me, that already puts me down. Another thing is that PhDs are not taught to be business. They're not taught how to sell the product. They're just taught sit down, do the research, publish a paper, publish another paper, do some teaching, get stressed, do some more papers, and then you can finish your PhD. There's no element of what happens after your PhD. They don't prepare you for that. And if that was embedded in the UK-wide courses, I think that would definitely go a long way.
When there is a fellow researcher from your uni days saying, I want to go private, what would you tell them? What advice would you give?
I would say just keep in mind on what you want to build and what use cases you might have. What value do you have in what you're building? Ask yourself that question before you actually start building things, and make sure that you have that as an end goal and objective, right? Throughout your research and throughout what you're doing and throughout your engagements. Just keep it in mind, visualize it, think it to yourself. Look yourself in the mirror every morning and say, I'm going to do this.
I tell them to go for it. Worst thing that can happen is it falls apart and then you go off and get a job at Google. It's the downside not that bad, really. You start up a limited company, it costs about 30 quid. And then if you don't like it or you're not getting much traction, well, you close it down and you go off and do something else. My feeling was we might as well try it. Otherwise, we'll probably get to 50 and regret it that we didn't, because there's always that what if.
If you definitely want to take risks, you should definitely go for it. Make sure you have some sort of financial, 6 to 12 months of running. Let's say 6 months, nothing happens, or 8 months, nothing happens. Well, you have 4 months left to quickly go back to a job. As long as you have some sort of backing. But also, one thing was key, what I found out recently was there's so many accelerators, even though not even based in the UK, that you can apply to. You definitely should look into joining accelerators because they have these pathways for people who just want to take the risk.
As you've heard from Ben Haaroon and Alhamza, if you want to build your own business, there's help available. and you do well to make use of that. One of the organizations helping academics is ConceptionX. So let's hear from Riam Kanso, who founded and leads the organizations, how ConceptionX works and how it can help budding entrepreneurs.
My name is Riam Kanso, and I am the CEO of ConceptionX, which I guess we'll be discussing today. ConceptionX is a venture program whose role is to transform PhDs into what we call venture scientists and to help them commercialize their PhD research areas into investable startups and in general just build products and services in deep technology. So we define deep technology as a technology based on original research conducted at the university level, which presents a higher R&D risk.
So mentioned venture, so it's not like a venture capital company, is it, where it provides funding? Okay.
No. I think in the past, the closest thing to what we are is probably an incubator, but the reality is that we operate one step before that. So we're an education transformation piece that runs alongside the PhD and helps the student commercialize their work as they are studying. So the program is unique in that sense because most programs like ConceptionX, which help people start companies, either require you to take time off or have you make a choice between your PhD and building a venture. But we've integrated both of these activities together, which has been hugely popular, both in terms of kind of de-risking building ventures as their career choice, but also in terms of de-risking the technologies that they're working on, because ConceptionX piggybacks on the top of the university infrastructure and resources that government has already invested in. So let me just take a few steps back and tell you why we set up ConceptionX in the first place, and then what the structure looks like, because I think the two are related. So I set ConceptionX up for three main reasons. The first is that we are dealing with these PhDs doing STEM subjects, and these are some of the brightest people in the world. Normally, their career options would have been either to kind of continue on an academic track or take a job in the corporate or public sector. But with the world changing, I think one of the things that ConceptionX does is to teach these people how to learn how to work for themselves and to have a more of an entrepreneurial mindset in terms of how they go about solving problems. The second reason why ConceptionX was set up is because the world has some really big problems. Climate, health, you name it. COVID is, a great example. So we need new ways of tackling these problems. And by giving these really smart people the right collaborations and, skill sets, it's really about approaching and tackling problems in new and creative ways. And the third and last reason why ConceptionX was set up is more about the role of the educational sector. Universities really have to adapt to the workforce of the future and what we need in our economy and in society. It's also the role of these PhDs to help people prepare for what they want to become. There have been numerous cases of people spending 3 years writing a dissertation that no one reads, and then they go on to join a job with Goldman Sachs or whoever, for argument's sake. The point is, ConceptionX, why don't you use these 3 years to build a venture? If the startup doesn't work out, and many of them don't, you go back and you're armed with more skills, and then you can go on to your academic track. So we're kind of removing this idea that building a venture needs to be a very risky all or nothing thing. So in that sense, this brings me nicely to how ConceptionX is set up. It is set up specifically for PhDs who are still doing their research in very interesting and high R&D risk areas. The program itself is 9 months long. Where we accept students, we take them at a very early stage of their ideation, so they can apply just with an idea and with the skills. Then they have a training program that we have developed collaboratively between academics and practitioners in leading London universities, and it is the equivalent of 9 full-day sessions, but spread out over 4 months. And then on top of that is the most effective part of ConceptionX, which is our unique coaching program. So once we identify the PhD teams who have something quite promising in terms of either a minimal viable product, a prototype, or an interesting proposition, we assign one business coach and one technology coach to them each, who see them every month and give them tasks to do. This is quite resource intensive, but it is by far the most effective part of ConceptionX, because the technology coach needs to be someone who has built a similar technology before, whereas the business coach needs to be someone who's aware of the industry that the PhD is participating in. On top of that, we have industry mentors, and then we have a series of events, panel selections that lead to our finalist demo day, where the top teams pitch in front of our audience of deep technology investors and clients that help the students move forward.
You mentioned 45% actually succeed, so that still leaves us with roughly half of them who don't.
Yeah.
How safe is it to fail? Some people may think, I'm setting up a company, I invest not only time but also money, and then it goes down south. What happens then?
So we are one of the lowest risk programs. And to be honest, we don't even call it failing, because not everybody in the world should be building a startup, right? Because it just wouldn't be economically tenable, and neither is everybody suited for the founder journey. But many students don't know that. And that's the whole point of trying it during the PhD. If you do not build your venture, there are multiple options. Some of them end up taking industry partnerships or internships with our industry partners. They become much better at communicating their work and identifying its impact. So they go back to the lab, and we have evidence that they're more successful at winning Innovate UK grants and things like that. So there is no failure in ConceptionX. The other thing is that 45% is very, very high, because we're talking about deep technology ventures. So we have yet to see, how their trajectory evolves as they go on from seed funding to Series A, etc.
When we talk about trying to build a business out of a PhD, they seem like two really separate things. It looks like what you're looking for are some kind of transferable skills between the two. What kind of transferable skills do you think researchers have they could actually use for building a business out of the research they're doing?
So I have a few comments on that. The first is that PhDs themselves, so the research topics that people end up doing, are much closer to market than they were even a few years ago, and definitely a few decades ago. So government now is investing in centers for doctoral training and things like financial computing. So this is not blue skies research anymore. In terms of the skills, I think there are a lot of things that are in common between entrepreneurship and doing a PhD. Because if you look at both of them with a PhD, basically you're spending 3 or 4 years, sometimes with very little supervision, where you have to identify your own goals and work towards something that's new and exciting. That's exactly what entrepreneurs do. So they have an open problem, they have curiosity, very little guidance, multiple ways to solve this problem, and they need to create something new.
Yeah, so from your experience, are there any common mistakes that are being made that that you can say they should avoid?
Oh yeah, and I would say that there are two main things, maybe three, and they're the following. The first is the perfectionism mindset with academics. The output is usually a research paper, and usually you would refrain from sending it to a reviewer to be published until you're kind of very sure about what you're proposing. It needs to look in a certain way. So this kind of, don't show it before it's complete idea is what they come with to building ventures. So one of the things we need to deprogram with them is to show the thing, whatever it is they're building, and get feedback from people before they think they have a near final version, which is not tested on customers. Takes a long time to get them to show you a proof of concept or a piece of code that they haven't completely perfected. The second problem is related to the first one, and it's about actually speaking to customers. There are numerous stories of people who have spent months of time, money, and everything to build what they think is a near final prototype, which in fact no one wants to use because they haven't bothered going out and asking whoever they're serving if they actually want or need to use that. So this is the second thing that we really push them to do, which is to go out and speak to people. Ask your potential clients, what are your problems? What it is that you want to solve? And this is the most awkward thing for many of them. And the third and final one is the I can do it all mentality. And I think this also comes from academic programming, where when a PhD joins a lab, like the star PhD is the one who can code, who can build the hardware. Like the more skills you have and the more you can take a project on. So a lot of them also come into building companies with that mentality. And it takes a while for them to realize that actually having a team is not just better in general, but it's also the responsible thing to do. Because there's absolutely no point in you spending your nights learning how to code in a new language when someone else can join you and take that burden off you. These are the three main things that we need to deprogram.
I think that's quite a good tip that you're giving there. So first of all, get feedback really early. And the second thing is, learn about teamwork. Finally, the question, we kind of haven't answered that one, and it's very difficult because it's the funding process itself, which is, I understand, not something that ConceptionX per se is doing. You're not a venture capitalist. But how can teams actually set themselves up for successful funding rounds?
We have two routes within ConceptionX. So whilst we don't have money to give them, we prepare them. So we have a network of around 50 venture capital and angel firms. When we prepare the top PhDs and we put them at the final event, which is our demo day, they have a great chance of kind of being picked up there by investors as well, and getting that level of investment. So our teams have raised around £10 million so far. And the second activity that they've raised, this money from is Innovate UK grants. As we kind of train them towards, the specific technology readiness level that makes them eligible for an Innovate UK grant, they have been trained to have the right business case to get that funding. And actually, grant funding of this sort is becoming increasingly popular for deep tech companies because should the company grow and get further on investment, it's a much cleaner cap table.
Well, thanks very much. That was very interesting, Riam, and I hope that we inspire more people to actually take the plunge.
Yeah, there's literally nothing to lose. You meet a lot of people, you learn a lot of stuff, and if academia is your one true passion, it's going to be there waiting for you.
I hope you enjoyed the first season of Code for Thought. I'm going to have a little summer break until the 6th of September, when I'll be back with Season 2 and a bunch of new exciting interviews. Until then, enjoy your summer, stay safe, and I hope to see you again in September. And with that, goodbye.